It began with a phone call, a shaky, trembling voice on the other end of a 911 line. A young girl, barely more than a child, whispering in panic, speaking words that didn't quite make sense to the operator who picked up. I can't stay here anymore. They're hurting us. Some of my brothers and sisters are chained to their beds. Please, can you send someone? Her voice cracked, every syllable carrying years of pent-up terror. She had rehearsed this moment for weeks, maybe even months. And yet, when the words left her lips, they still felt unreal, as though speaking them aloud could shatter the fragile, secret world she and her siblings had been trapped in for years. The dispatcher on the other end was skeptical at first. Children call 911 all the time. They exaggerate, they prank, they tell wild stories. But there was something about the tone in this girl's voice, the way it quivered with both fear and determination, that stopped him from dismissing her outright. He asked her where she was. The girl hesitated. She didn't know the address. She had never really been allowed to leave the house, never seen the street sign outside her own home. She had lived her entire life inside walls that were supposed to protect her, but instead had become her prison. I ran away, she whispered. I'm outside. I don't know the street, but I have pictures. I took pictures of my sisters. They're chained. The dispatcher's heart froze. Pictures. Chains. This wasn't the rambling of a child making up a story. This was evidence. And so began one of the most haunting cases of modern American crime, the story of David and Louise Turpin, and the children who grew up inside what the world would come to know as the House of Horrors. From the outside, the Turpin family looked, at least on paper, like an ordinary household. In photographs that Louise proudly posted on Facebook, the 13 siblings were lined up in matching outfits, smiling stiffly for the camera. David and Louise stood behind them, holding hands, beaming as if they were living the perfect suburban dream. To neighbors, the Turpins seemed private, maybe even a little eccentric. Their children rarely played outside, rarely went to school, rarely interacted with anyone at all. But in a world where many people mind their own business, the Turpins simply blended into the backdrop of their California community. Behind those walls, however, was a reality so twisted, so unimaginable, that when it finally came to light, even seasoned investigators struggled to process what they had uncovered. To understand how this nightmare came to be, we have to go back to where it all started. David Turpin was born in 1961 in West Virginia. By most accounts, he was quiet, intelligent, but socially awkward. From a young age, he displayed a mind built for structure, control, and routine. He excelled academically, particularly in mathematics and engineering skills that would later earn him a lucrative job in the defense industry. Louise Robinette, born in 1968 in Princeton, West Virginia, grew up in a very different environment. She came from a strict, deeply religious family, where appearances were everything. Friends would later recall her as a dreamer girl who longed for love, attention, and a fairy tale life that lifted her far away from the restrictions of her upbringing. When David and Louise met, it seemed at first like a classic small-town love story. He was a nerdy, serious young man. She was a pretty girl with a rebellious streak, against her parents' wishes. Louise eloped with David when she was just 16. Together, they built a world where they didn't have to answer to anyone but themselves. But freedom, for David and Louise, quickly turned into isolation. And isolation, in time, warped into something far darker. The Turpins began having children almost immediately after their marriage. First one, then another, then another. Soon, their family expanded beyond what most people could even imagine. 13 children in total. At first, to outsiders, it seemed like a religious devotion to being fruitful and multiplying. But inside the home, the growing number of children became less about love and more about control. David and Louise began constructing what can only be described as a system of rules. They decided when the children could eat, when they could sleep, when they could bathe. And as the years went on, the rules became increasingly strict. Meals were rationed. Sometimes the children were given only one slice of bread per day, smeared with peanut butter or ketchup. While David and Louise indulged in fast food and desserts, their children wasted away, their bodies shrinking, their growth stunted. Showers were restricted to once a year. Clothes were not replaced, even as they became worn and stained. The children's hair grew long, their skin pale from lack of sunlight, their eyes hollow from years of neglect. Worst of all, disobedience was punished not with lectures or grounding, but with chains. Heavy, cold chains locked around their wrists or ankles, fastened them to bed frames for weeks or even months at a time. The house of place meant to nurture and shelter had become a prison. But Louise, obsessed with appearances, still clung to her fantasy of the perfect family. She dressed the children in identical clothing for staged family photos. She forced them to smile even as their bodies ached from hunger. She posted those pictures online, crafting the image of a wholesome, happy household. Friends who saw the photos were impressed. Some even envied her, praising her for being such a devoted mother. David played his part too, at work. He was a highly respected engineer at Lockheed Martin and later Northrop Grumman. His colleagues knew little of his personal life, but they assumed he was simply a family man with many kids, maybe unusual, but nothing alarming. And so the facade held year after year, while behind closed doors, the children suffered in silence. Imagine, for a moment, being one of those children. Your stomach gnaws with hunger, but the pantry is locked. You smell food on your parents' plates, but you know it's not for you. You lie awake at night, chained to your bed, wondering if tomorrow will be better or worse. You want to cry, but crying only makes them angry, so you learn to stay silent. You learn to endure. You cling to your siblings, the only people in the world who truly understand your suffering. You whisper stories to each other about what life might be like outside. Sunshine, parks, school, friends, the kind of things you've only seen on TV or glimpsed through a window. But year after year, those dreams feel further and further away. And then one day one of you decides you've had enough. The responsibility fell to the Turpin's 17-year-old daughter, Jordan. Jordan had always been a little different from her siblings. She was curious, restless, desperate to see more of the world beyond the walls of their home. She had secretly taught herself to use a discarded cell phone, watching music videos and clips of life outside a forbidden window into the freedom that lay just out of reach. And with each video, each glimpse of laughter and light, she realized something vital. What was happening to her and her siblings wasn't normal. It wasn't right. So Jordan began to plan, quietly, secretly, in whispers and stolen moments. She rehearsed what she would say. She took photographs of her sisters in chains, storing them as proof in case no one believed her. She studied the layout of the neighborhood, memorizing every turn she could see from the upstairs window. And then, one cold January night in 2018, Jordan took her chance. With trembling hands, she climbed out of a window, clutching the phone. She ran through the darkness, her heart pounding, her lungs burning with fear. She had never been outside alone before. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow made her want to turn back. But she didn't stop. Not this time. She dialed 911. And with that call, the nightmare began to unravel. When police officers arrived at the Turpin home, they expected to find perhaps a case of neglect, children a little malnourished, maybe a messy house. They had no idea what awaited them. The door creaked open. The stench hit them first, the overwhelming smell of filth, of human waste, of decay. The house was cluttered with trash, rotting food, and dirt. And then the children emerged, pale, thin, trembling. Some could barely walk, their muscles so weak from lack of use. Their eyes were wide, frightened, yet filled with a flicker of hope as they saw the uniforms, the badges, the possibility of rescue. In one bedroom, officers found two of the siblings shackled to their beds, the chains heavy and unmistakable. This wasn't neglect. This was something else entirely. This was abuse on a scale few could comprehend, and it had gone on for decades. They had seen it all. Riverside County deputies were seasoned, hardened by years of responding to calls of abuse, neglect, and domestic violence. But what they walked into on that night would haunt even the most experienced among them. The stench of unwashed bodies and rotting food hung in the air. Every step to the home felt like wading deeper into a nightmare. Piles of garbage, dirty diapers, and half-eaten scraps cluttered every room. The air was heavy with despair. And then the children appeared one by one, fragile, skeletal figures emerging from the shadows of their prison. Their skin was pale, almost translucent from years without sunlight. Their limbs were stick-thin, their bodies frail and stunted. Some were adults by age, yet their size and physical development resembled children half their years. Their hollow cheeks and sunken eyes told the story of relentless hunger. Some of them couldn't speak properly. Their voices cracked, words slurred, as though language itself had been stolen from them. Others were so weak they could barely hold themselves upright. And then came the image seared into every officer's mind. Two of the siblings chained to their beds. The clinking of the metal, the cruel bite of the shackles against skin. This wasn't a metaphor. This was literal imprisonment. Children, bound in the place they should have felt safest. The deputies exchanged looks: disbelief, rage, horror. What had they just uncovered? As the deputies escorted the siblings out, one by one, into the night air, it became clear just how much these children had been denied. The younger ones clutched each other, wide-eyed, staring at the world beyond their doorstep, as though they had stepped onto another planet. The older ones were disoriented, stumbling, their legs too weak for freedom. Some whispered questions that broke the hearts of the rescuers. Is it still going to be night when we wake up tomorrow? One asked. Another wanted to know what medicine was, a concept entirely foreign to her. One child, now an adult in years but not in stature, looked up at the deputies and asked softly, "What is a police officer?" These were children in age but not in experience, and they were adults in age but denied every rite of passage that should have prepared them for independence. They had been hidden from the world so completely that the world itself was a mystery. Meanwhile, inside the house, David and Louise Turpin were taken into custody. Louise wept, insisting that everything was a misunderstanding. She clutched her purse, muttering prayers, repeating over and over that she was a good mother. David, on the other hand, remained eerily calm. He asked no questions, gave no resistance, and simply walked with officers as though this were an inconvenience, a mistake that would soon be corrected. But the evidence told another story. Chains, starvation, malnutrition, children who didn't even know their own ages because birthdays were never celebrated, children who had never seen a doctor, never been to school, never known the simplest joys of life outside their four walls. This wasn't neglect. This was torture. As the children were rushed to hospitals for immediate care, investigators began piecing together the puzzle of the Turpin family. Medical examinations revealed shocking truths. Several of the older siblings in their 20s weighed less than 90 pounds. Many were suffering from muscle atrophy. Their bodies weakened from lack of movement. Growth had been stunted so severely that some looked like children rather than adults. Teeth were decayed, hair brittle, skin pale and scarred. Doctors determined that most of the children had never seen a physician in their lives. Some had never even received vaccines or basic medical care. Nutritionists concluded that the children were severely malnourished. Their diets had consisted of little more than peanut butter, bologna, and bread. Occasionally, they were fed frozen dinners, but only if David and Louise deemed them obedient. But beyond the physical wounds were the psychological scars. The children flinched at loud noises. They cowered when adults entered the room. They spoke in hushed tones, conditioned by years of silence. And yet, beneath all of that fear, there was something else: resilience. They had survived the unthinkable. Investigators soon uncovered how David and Louise had maintained such control over their 13 children. It wasn't just the physical restraints, though the chains were a horrifying centerpiece of their methods. It was psychological domination. The children were taught that the outside world was dangerous, filled with evil people who wanted to hurt them. Louise read Bible passages selectively, twisting them into justifications for obedience and isolation. David enforced strict rules. Meals were withheld as punishment, showers forbidden, sleep schedules dictated. Even bathroom breaks were regulated. When the children disobeyed, they were beaten, starved, or shackled for weeks at a time. Yet, in public, David and Louise crafted the illusion of a wholesome, devout family. They dressed their children alike for trips to Disneyland. They renewed their vows multiple times. For the children lined up in matching outfits, forced a smile for the camera. Neighbors saw oddities but dismissed them. The children were pale, quiet, strangely dressed, but some assumed it was simply a matter of strict religious upbringing. After all, the Turpins appeared polite and unassuming. No one could have guessed the horror that lay behind their front door. When the news broke, the community and indeed the world was stunned. How could 13 children suffer in silence for so long, right under everyone's noses? How had no one noticed? Teachers had never reported absences because most of the children had never been enrolled in school. Doctors had never raised alarms because they had never been taken to one. Neighbors, though unsettled, had never called authorities. It was a failure of oversight and a testament to how easily abuse can be hidden when appearances are carefully curated. Media outlets around the globe swarmed the story, dubbing the Turpin residence the House of Horrors. Pictures of the home, the family, and the shackles circulated online, sparking outrage and disbelief. The question everyone wanted answered was, why? Experts weighed in, trying to untangle the motives behind the Turpin's reign of terror. Some pointed to religious extremism. David and Louise had raised their children under a twisted interpretation of faith, using scripture to justify cruelty. Others highlighted narcissism. Louise, in particular, seemed obsessed with image, constantly posting smiling family portraits online, even as her children starved. Still others pointed to David's need for control, a man who thrived on order and structure, who extended professional precision as an engineer into a chilling micromanagement of his children's lives. In the end, there was no single explanation, only a devastating reality. Two parents who wielded power not to protect, but to dominate and destroy. As investigators built their case, the children began their long journey toward healing. Hospital staff recalled their astonishment at the siblings' reactions to simple things. One child asked what coffee was. Another tasted ice cream for the first time, her eyes lighting up with wonder. A nurse remembered how one of the older girls clutched her hand, asking, "Is this real? Am I safe now?" Yes, she was safe. For the first time in her life, she was free. But freedom came with challenges. The older siblings struggled with independence, having been denied education and basic life skills. Some didn't know how to cross a street or use money. Others were so malnourished that they needed months of medical intervention just to stabilize their health. And yet, with every obstacle, there was progress. Laughter began to echo in hospital halls where once there had only been silence. Bonds between siblings, already unbreakable, grew even stronger as they leaned on one another in their new world. Meanwhile, David and Louise faced justice. In court, the couple appeared frail, almost pathetic, a far cry from the powerful figures their children had once feared. They faced multiple charges, including torture, false imprisonment, child abuse, and cruelty to dependent adults. At first, they pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. Pictures, testimonies, medical reports, chains. Ultimately, both David and Louise changed their pleas to guilty in order to avoid a trial. In 2019, they were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As the sentence was read, several of their children delivered statements. Their voices shook with emotion, but their words carried strength. "My parents took my whole life from me," one said, "but now I'm taking my life back." The courtroom fell silent. For the first time, the children's voices silenced for so long were heard by the world. Even after the sentencing, the questions lingered. How could this have gone undetected for so long? How could a system designed to protect children fail so completely? Investigators admitted that the Turpin case exposed deep flaws in oversight. The children had fallen through every crack, never registered in schools, never taken to doctors, hidden behind walls and staged smiles. And yet, out of that darkness, something remarkable emerged: resilience. The Turpin children, though scarred, proved unbreakable. They were determined to build lives of meaning, to pursue education, to chase dreams they had once thought impossible. One dreamed of becoming a nurse. Another wanted to be a writer. One spoke of singing on stage someday. They had been prisoners. Now they were survivors. And their story, though haunting, became a testament to the enduring power of hope.